Hello everybody and welcome back to ComedIan MTG. I'm your host Ian. Now today I am playing with Play to Win after I got to play on Play to Win with Play to Win, but now Play to Win is here playing to win. All that to say, Play to Win was generous enough to have me on their channel, and we are featuring a two-part game series. If you want to go see part 1, check it out on their channel. I'll leave a link in the description down below. But part 2 is here. Let's watch it. Let's check out the players in today's pod. I'm going first today, and I'm playing my primer Winota Snowball stacks. In second is Cameron. He's playing a mid-range Vial Smasher Thras consultation list. In third is Tyler, and he's playing Mirror Kinnan. Last but not least is Dylan with his take on Advantage Thras. My opening hand was a Plateau, Mox Diamond, Magus of the Moon, Aven Mind Sensor, Skirk Prospector, Windswept Heath, and a Gemstone Caverns. Now I got to have one of my favorite combos in an opening hand, which is Gemstone Caverns and Mox Diamond, because usually either you can exile the Mox Diamond to your Gemstone Caverns or pitch the Gemstone Caverns to your Mox Diamond. Now this game plan ended up changing a bit when I had my opening draw because I drew a Grand Abolisher, but the initial plan when I kept the hand was that I had a bunch of really powerful 3-drops in hand, so being able to keep this hand knowing that on turn 3 I would be able to play some of my most effective stacks pieces, I knew I had to keep it. Being able to play Skirk Prospector on turn 1 to either A, be an early ritual, or B, be a card that could eventually generate me some Winota value, I knew this hand was pretty solid. So Tyler starts us off with the Gemstone Caverns. Now the reason I end up changing my game plan and going to Grand Abolisher here is because Grand Abolisher can protect some of these very impactful stacks pieces. So Aven Mind Sensor and Magus of the Moon can have a game warping effect on my opponents, and I knew if they were basically unable to interact with these cards that I would have a huge advantage going into the mid to late game. Now it's not quite usual for Kinnan to avoid playing a non-land mana source here, and Dylan plays an Arbor Elf. So with these factors combined, I think Magus of the Moon is going to be extremely impactful, and that is the play I end up going for this turn. Now, Cameron wanted to fetch before Magus resolved, and we had to make sure because Grand Abolisher stops a number of activated abilities, but it does not stop lands.
Well, Mr. Fancy Lands sucks 2 damage.
Now, I immediately get punished by Cameron's turn because he plays a Dimir Signet and a Mox Amber, immediately sort of invalidating my whole point of playing Magus the Moon. Luckily, my play does force Tyler into an awkward position where he plays a Phyrexian Metamorph as a copy of Mox Amber, which is pretty good because now I'm turning a resource that he could take to maybe clone one of our best creatures or artifacts and now making him use it as something to get him mana just to keep up in the game. Now during Dylan's turn, he starts to pull ahead a little bit because Dockside allows him to basically invalidate Magus of the Moon. Now in response to this Mystical Tutor, Cameron fires off a Force of Vigor in hopes of slowing Dylan down and also just hitting me for free because he can. With Dylan so far ahead and revealing an Eldritch Evolution here, I know on my turn I have to hold up Aven Mind Sensor and just go to combat, hit Cameron a little bit, and pass because Aven Mind Sensor coming out is extremely important to surviving this game. Tyler, wanting to also be on defense and have Kinnan activations backed up, just passes on his turn. Now playing it safe here, Dylan plays a Grand Abolisher in his second main phase, basically forcing anyone to run out interaction. Luckily I had the Mind Sensor up, which stopped him from being able to go off and win. Now I have 4 mana and a non-human spell, so you know what time it is. I'm bringing out Winota and going directly to combat. Unfortunately, my first trigger of the game is a Stone Cold Whiff, so that sucks. So Cam goes to just untap and pass, and Tyler overloads a Cyclonic Rift in his end step, setting him up for a really solid opportunity the next turn. And because of this Rift, Tyler is able to keep up his resources and just pass the turn while the rest of us are focusing on rebuilding our resources. As we're coming back to my turn, my thought process is focusing on what stacks pieces I need to get back out as soon as possible. My impression is that Aven Mind Sensor will be critically important, so I play a Grand Abolisher to protect it and then play Mind Sensor on the main phase, which is not normally when it's played. Despite just being the victim of Cyclonic Rift, Cameron has a really good time rebuilding his resources because of his draw of Kinnan. And we are seeing one of the problems with Kinnan displayed through Tyler's game right now. He activates Kinnan and completely whiffs on the trigger. Because of this more efficient, cleaner version of Kinnan that eschews all of the large creature payoffs from hitting Kinnan and focuses more on win cons, it does tend to have a hard time if it runs out of resources in the hand. It definitely does have a lot of upsides, but that is the one downside I've found when looking at the most common Kinnan builds. Now at this point I do point out that Dylan does still have a Dockside Extortionist in his hand, and my opponents are actually dumping resources into the Dockside, allowing it to be a much better payoff when we come back to Dylan's turn. Luckily, as I predicted before, the Mind Sensor really does mess with Dylan's plan, and we're lucky enough to not just kind of lose to Dylan, even though he produces a ridiculous amount of mana. My draw for turn is a Torch Courier, which is nice because it allows me to replay my Winota and Torch Courier and get 2 triggers off of Winota. My first hit off of Winota is a Thalia's Lancers, which is great because it allows me to go tutor up any legendary permanent in my deck, which is almost always going to be Kiki-Jiki.
Kiki-Jiki, or as he's known on the streets, Keekers McSqueakers.
What?
On my second Winota trigger, I flip over a Sanctum Prelate, which is one of the best cards in my deck. I've noticed that with Sanctum Prelate, one of the most effective numbers to name is the number 2. It stops a lot of the best win cons in the format, as well as stopping a number of just generic value pieces in removal. The only other number I tend to think about using is number 3, and that's because it stops Toxic Deluge a lot, but it definitely does not have as big an impact on the other parts of most decks. Now, the other players are really doing a lot of spinning their wheels here, just trying to leverage some sort of advantage underneath all of these stacks pieces, which is becoming increasingly hard as I get more and more to the battlefield.
I can't do Thras' activations on your turn with Abolisher, right? Yeah, so I'm going to do some of these now.
Unfortunately, I did not hit one of my human Kiki-Jiki combos at this point, because it would be perfect timing with Kiki-Jiki in my hand and no way for my opponents to interact in my turn. If I had had one of those pieces now, I basically could have won the game. But unfortunately, I'm forced to just go to combat again and try and grind out more value. So bittersweet news here when I hit a combat Celerant, which means next turn I will be able to win. So my game plan right now is to lock down the board as much as possible, which is why I put out my Magus of the Moon. Now Cameron really needs to try and win, so he jams a Chain of Vapor targeting my Prelate, and that resolves. He then plays a Dockside, and in response Dylan tries to dig for some answers but is unable to find anything. He does flip Emil, which means that we also have to deal with Dylan as a threat if it gets to his turn. Cameron then jams the one tutor that can get around my Aven Mind Sensor, which is Lim Duel's Vault.
So one time this card isn't worse than a tutor, and I hate it.
Now knowing what's on top of his library, Cameron activates Thrasios and reveals a Basalt Monolith, which goes infinite with Kinnan. Now Tyler responds with a Fierce Guardianship, but Cameron has a pack to protect it, and even though Tyler also has a Flusterstorm, Cameron has way more mana than he needs to be able to pay for the spell, and he's able to then make infinite mana.
Yeah, because I can present a loop where I make infinite mana, draw my whole deck with Thrasios, and then with some of the extra colored mana I have, I can Thassa's Oracle into a win from there.
Alright. Thank you for watching another gameplay episode here on ComedIan MTG. Big thanks to Play to Win for collaborating on this episode. It was really fun doing a 2-part series with them, and it was an awesome time. If you're here on YouTube, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and if you want to go that extra mile, you can check out our Patreon where you can get benefits like Discord access and get your name in the credits of the show, much like these amazing patrons right here.